Would you ever dare to drive a road that seems to defy common sense? A road with no guardrails, barely any shoulder room, and where a single mistake could send you plunging over a cliff up to 1,000 feet straight down into a canyon. And if that didn't finish you off, your car might tumble into an ice-cold river below. If you're still inside when it hits the water, that might just be the end of your story. Unbelievable as it sounds, thousands of people brave this road every year. Some even drive it like it's just another Tuesday commute though. I wouldn't recommend trying it with your eyes closed. Our journey begins in the charming mountain town of Red Pine, Colorado, a quiet gem nestled in the heart of the Rockies. Today, we're taking on what many call one of America's most terrifying drives, a notorious stretch of highway carved into cliffs so steep they seem to drop into another world. We're going to drive the most dangerous segment of the legendary Skyline Highway and hopefully live to tell the tale. Along the way, I'll also share some fascinating history and breathtaking sights that make this road both terrifying and unforgettable. The Skyline Highway spans about 25 miles through the remote southwestern corner of Colorado, connecting the town of Red Pine to the historic mining outpost of Silver Gate. But we're zeroing in on the most spine-chilling 5-mile stretch, the portion that leaves Red Pine and winds through the jagged, jaw-dropping peaks of the Eagle Fang Gorge. It's the section seasoned locals warn you about and the one you're least likely to forget. We started our journey right in the heart of Red Pine. Cruising down Main Street felt like rolling through a living time capsule, with its beautifully preserved Victorian buildings and stunning backdrop of the Thundercliff Mountains. Many of these buildings date all the way back to the late 1800s San era of gold rush dreams and rugged frontier life. But we weren't here for the architecture. As soon as we rolled into town, we began our ascent up the Skyline Highway. At first, it didn't seem so bad. A few gentle switchbacks, a scenic overlook they call the window to the west, which we'll come back to later, but within minutes, the road took a darker turn. Hugging the mountainside like a narrow ribbon, the highway quickly shed any signs of comfort. To my right, there was barely 2 feet of shoulder before it dropped off into thin air. No barriers, no second chances. I've driven some sketchy roads before, but most had at least a guardrail or a decent buffer zone, something to give your brain the illusion of safety. Not here. The moment you crossed that white line, you were in freefall territory. I could feel my grip tightening on the wheel end, not just the wheel, if you catch my drift. After a few intense minutes, I saw a small pullout up ahead. I stopped to breathe, stretch my legs, and take in the staggering views. Imagine waterfalls tumbling down the cliffs, mist catching in the morning light. It almost made me forget I was on the brink of death just moments ago. But the break was short-lived. I got back in and pressed on. And that's when things really got intense. I'm not exaggerating, my stomach dropped. I was clutching the wheel so hard I thought it might snap in half. Every second on that road stretched into a mini eternity. Just a few feet to the right of my tires, there were sheer drop-offs, jagged rocks, and the ever-rushing Ironshade River far below. Some sections gave a little more breathing room, but others, if your tires even kissed the edge, you'd be tumbling into loose shaleland, then taking a freezing dive straight into that glacial water. Still, I wasn't ready to quit. We'd come this far, and there was no turning back. As I drove, a few questions swirled in my mind. Who thought it was a good idea to build a road on the side of a cliff? When was it built? And how did it earn the name Skyline Highway? Turns out, the original path dates all the way back to 1882. It was carved out by 2 ambitious men, Otto Miles and Frederick Wallinus, a rugged wagon trail between Red Pine and Silver Gate. At the time, it cost about $10,000 per mile, which was a fortune back then. Otto, being the savvy entrepreneur he was, charged tolls to travelers brave enough to use his route. Eventually, though, the state stepped in. Local miners and merchants were fed up with paying out the nose just to move supplies and made enough noise that the road became public property. Here's a vintage photo from that era, people hauling goods by horse-drawn wagons along this treacherous path. Can you imagine doing that without seatbelts, power steering, or even brakes? Honestly, it made me wonder what would be scarier. Driving the road today with modern vehicles and distracted drivers? Or navigating it back then, clinging to the back of a wooden cart? Tough call. And as for the name Skyline Highway, that's still a bit of a mystery. There are a few theories. Some say it's named for the million-dollar views that greet you around every bend. Others joke that you'd have to pay them $1 million just to drive it, thanks to the blind curves, avalanche zones, and total lack of safety barriers. Another version claims that each mile cost roughly $1 million to build, though that might be more legend than fact. While filming, I noticed how close the Ironshade River was running to the road, so I pulled over to get a closer look at its golden hues. Fun fact, the river's color changes with the seasons. The yellow tint comes from mineral deposits, mixed with fresh snowmelt. The name Ironshade actually comes from a native word meaning muddy water. Finally, as I made it through the heart of the gorge, I felt my whole body relax. For the first time in miles, I wasn't white-knuckling the wheel. I could actually enjoy the view, those rugged peaks, the valley stretching far below, and the occasional ghostly remnant of mining days gone by. This area, after all, was once one of the richest mining zones in the country. Back in the 1870s, prospectors pulled millions of ounces of gold and silver out of these hills, not to mention lead, zinc, and copper by the ton. And here I was, just trying to survive the drive. Scene opens with drone shot of a cliff-hugging highway. Ask yourself this: would you ever dare to drive on a highway so unforgiving, so bare-boned, that a single wrong move could send you plummeting 1,000 feet below? There are barely any guardrails. The shoulder space? Practically non-existent. If your car slips over the edge, you're not just crashing, you're free-falling into a canyon that ends in an icy river. And if you're not out before the plunge, well, that might be your last ride. And yet, people drive this road every single day. Some could probably do it with their eyes closed, though I wouldn't recommend trying that. This is the $1 Million Highway, a legendary 25.5-mile stretch winding through Colorado's San Juan Mountains. Today, we're tackling the most terrifying 5 miles of it, starting in the picturesque mountain town of Ouray and heading towards Silverton, driving through Ouray. We kicked off in the heart of Ouray, postcard-perfect town, nestled in the valley with its charming Victorian buildings and towering peaks. Most of these structures date back to the late 1800s, giving the place a rugged, gold rush kind of soul. From there, we began the climb. At first, it felt like just another mountain road, some gentle switchbacks, a beautiful lookout known as the Switzerland of America. But it didn't take long before things got real. Look out your window. Notice how close the tire is to the edge? That's not a hill. That's a sheer drop into a canyon carved by ice and time. And there's no buffer, no safety net, just a thin white line separating your car from disaster. I've driven some sketchy roads before, but this was next level. Other scary drives at least gave you some comfort with guardrails or a few extra feet of gravel. Not here. Here, 2 feet past the line and you're airborne. I pulled into a turnout just to calm my nerves. After taking in the staggering views and maybe questioning my life choices, I climbed back in and carried on. But this next stretch, it was where the real test began. I gripped the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me alive. My stomach dropped with every curve. My eyes barely blinked. The cliff edges were just feet away. Some stretches offered a bit more shoulder, but then it would narrow again, and you'd be right back to white-knuckle territory. History segment. As I drove, a few questions hit me. Whose wild idea was it to build a road like this on the edge of a mountain? And why is it called the $1 Million Highway? Turns out, this road officially, US Route 550, dates back to the early 1880s. It was originally a wagon route built by Otto Mears and Fred Walshy, and cost about $10,000 per mile, huge money back then. They even charged travelers a toll to use it, which didn't go over too well with the local miners and merchants. Eventually, the state took it over. Some say it's called the $1 Million Highway because of the panoramic $1 million views. Others joke they'd only drive it for $1 million. A third theory claims each mile cost $1 million to build due to how treacherous and complex the construction was. Narrow Canyon, Animas River views. Just off the road, you can catch glimpses of Bear Creek Falls and the murky, metal-rich waters of the Uncompahgre River, which gets its yellowish tint from snowmelt mixing with minerals. Fun fact, the name Uncompahgre comes from a Ute word meaning dirty water. Once I cleared the gorge, I finally exhaled. The road flattened a bit. The drop-offs weren't as steep. I could actually enjoy the view mountains scarred with old mining roads, waterfalls tumbling off cliff faces, and remnants of Colorado's gold rush legacy. turnaround point, and abandoned mining structures. Eventually, I reached a spot called the Treasury Tunnel, a haunting reminder of the area's mining days. Beneath these mountains lie nearly 100 miles of underground tunnels. Miners used to ride electric trams deep below to extract precious ore. The tunnel entrance, still visible today, is like a portal to the past. I decided it was time to turn around. My time in Ouray was short, and there was more to explore before the sun dipped behind those icy peaks. But the return trip down the mountain, that had its own stories to tell. I stopped by several abandoned buildings, possibly old bunkhouses or maintenance sheds. One larger structure looked like an old service garage, likely used to keep mining vehicles running during the boom years. Another, smaller building had the charm of an old schoolhouse, but was probably just a cabin or an office of sorts. Most were marked "No Trespassing," but that didn't stop me from zooming in for a closer look. One ruin, the Larson Brothers Mine, was purchased in 1933. The site once included a mill, bunkhouse, blacksmith shop, and snow shed. Now, it's just bones ghosts of a time when the mountains bled silver and gold. Return through the gorge. The drive back down wasn't quite as intense, mostly because I wasn't hugging the cliffside anymore, but don't let that fool you. It's still no joyride. I chatted with a couple at Bear Creek Falls who'd driven the highway dozens of times. They told me that locals take this route in every kind of weather, son. Rain, snow, ice, and sometimes cars do go over the edge. According to travel.com, the $1 Million Highway has claimed over 400 lives since 1992. It remains one of the deadliest roads in America. Storm clouds rolling in, drone shot over Cascade Falls. As I made my final descent, the weather began to turn. The blue skies darkened. A storm was creeping in just as the forecast had warned. I barely made it back to Ouray before the first raindrops hit. But I had just enough time to launch the drone and capture Cascade Falls in all its thundering glory. Outro cozy shot from town. Before wrapping up the day, I stopped in at the Ouray Brewery. Great burgers, cold beer, and a rooftop view that's tough to beat. Unless, of course, you're the type that can't handle your liquor. In that case, maybe just stick to water. So, would I drive the $1 Million Highway again? In a heartbeat. But next time, I might bring an extra pair of underwear.